Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is Michael Cavacini, and today I'm here with the best-selling author, Dan Padavana. Dan, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
Yes, really excited to speak with you today. Uh, Dan, so, for those who aren't familiar with your work or what you focus on, or just the kind of books that you write, you know, tell us, who are you and what do you do?
I write books which are kind of a merger between mysteries and serial killer thrillers. So they're mysteries with more of an edge. I began writing these about, well, it would have been early 2019, late 2018. And I've been very blessed in that the market has been hot. People have really taken to my books, and I've completed now two series. I've completed a series called Darkwater Cove, and I just finished off a series called the Wolf Lake Thriller series. And that did very, very well for me to the point where I'm spinning it off into a new series now called the Thomas Shepard Mysteries. And that first book will come out this December, shortly after Christmas.
That's exciting. So, I'm curious, when you're talking about the types of books that you write, what kind of authors have you read who inspired you where you're like, boy, I wish I could write a book as good as this one? Who are you drawing inspiration from when you're working on your own books?
I would start immediately with Dean Koontz, who is kind of a hero to me for a lot of different reasons. For one, he's a fantastic writer. He's very prolific. He can write in multiple genres. He's written horror, very very dark horror. He's also written, pure thriller, pure mystery type books as well. And another thing which I really love about Dean Koontz, besides the fact that he loves dogs, and so do I, is that he always seems to wrap up his stories on a very positive note, with a lot of hope and you can't help but feel good about the human race after finishing one of his books, even though the preceding 300 or 400 pages may have been really gripping and really bloody. He always manages to bring you back to that point. I would also mention Stephen King. Stephen King, of course, I think, I'm certainly not alone in mentioning Stephen King. I've been reading Stephen King since I was very young, probably fifth or sixth grade. When I picked up The Shining and started motoring through all of his books after that. Um, he's also extremely prolific, and I think his characterizations are tremendous, and they definitely lead me to think about characters in different ways, and not just descriptions, but how people actually act in real life. And then many new authors too who have come on the scene. I'm a humongous fan of Melinda Lee, who writes pretty dark thrillers herself, thrillers and mysteries. In fact, she doesn't live too far from me. She lives about 2 hours east of me. I've never made contact with her, but it's interesting that we both kind of write about upstate New York from time to time.
That's great. Yeah, I met Dean Koontz at Thriller Fest a few years back, just at this cocktail party. Thriller Fest, for those who haven't attended, it's a pretty amazing conference for both readers and writers. And I had the opportunity to kind of hobnob with Nelson DeMille, Lee Child, Michael Connelly, and Dean Koontz and others, John Sanford. And it's amazing because when you hear these authors speak about their craft and their process, it's just remarkable to hear how they pulled off, especially when you hear about authors like Stephen James is one of my favorites, and he flies by the seat of his pants. He's believes in organic storytelling, I think, as he calls it, where Steve Berry is more of a outliner. He likes to plot things out and say this is what happens and when. Um, where other authors like Stephen James are saying, well, hey, if I write out what's going to happen when, I'm actually going to get bored as I write it because I want to be like the reader and kind of not know where we're headed, but just kind of discovered along the way. So, I mean, when it comes to that type of writing, what camp do you fall into? Or are you a little bit of both?
I'm a little bit of both. I began as what they call a seat of the pantser, where I just wrote right off the top of my head. And At the time, I was actually writing horror. I wasn't writing thrillers and mysteries at that point, and it worked pretty well. I even wrote a series like that. But I found that I would hit points where there would be days where I just couldn't bring myself to write, and and as I worked on that portion of myself, I came to the conclusion that it was fear based in that I didn't really know where the story was heading next, and I was afraid that whatever I chose would be the wrong path. And not knowing what to write next became a convenient excuse to procrastinate. So that got me into the idea of thinking about maybe outlining or maybe coming up with a better system. When I switched to thrillers and mysteries, though, that really forced the issue because you're planting clue seeds throughout your story. There are various uh, events which occur early in the book which need to add up and lead to the big reveal at the end or however the story ends up. So I found there was no way that I could be a seat of the pantser. At least I couldn't be. I definitely know thriller mystery writers who are seat of the pantsers, but I'm not. Outlining to me, though, seemed too, as you were stating, boring. It's a very long process, very regimented. And once you finish an outline, you pretty much know everything that's going to happen in that book from like the first sentence to the last. It's just a matter of filling in the details. And I didn't think that that would be very enjoyable to me. So what I do is something called story beats. And everybody has a little bit different version of story beats, but the way they work for me is I will construct a new story idea, and then I will write a short paragraph which explains every chapter. This is going to be the clue which gets revealed. This will be the character interaction which leads to this, to that. Um, and that provides me with leeway. So now I can get all my chapters lined up ahead of time and make sure that the story is cohesive, that there isn't this big plot hole that I'm going to write myself into. So I'm set up from that standpoint. But there's also quite a bit of leeway, which allows me to creatively express throughout the chapter. I can take it in a lot of different ways. I can have conversations go in different directions. I can add in different events which occur to me on the fly. And if something just better occurs to me as I'm going along, and I realize, and this does occur at least a few times per book, that I realize that I should make this change, then it's pretty simple to go through the remaining chapters and just say, okay, alter this, alter that, and then I keep everything intact. So I fall right in between, smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of the same. At least, I mean, I'm working on a book that's nonfiction, and I basically, for my book, I interviewed a bunch of people, and as I go through those interviews, I'm kind of coming up with like themes, and I create, essentially like chapter documents where I dump in quotes from people about those themes, and then eventually I'll just kind of revise it and stitch it together. And speaking of the revising process, I know from writing not necessarily books, but just writing in general, that others have said that your first job really is to just, you don't have to write the perfect book. You have to write just a shitty first draft. And then once you get that draft in place, then you can revise, revise, revise until you get the book to where it needs to be. For you, what is that revision process like? And how many revisions are you going through once you say, okay, this is good enough?
There are multiple schools of thought on this as well. The Stephen King camp, he wrote this in On Writing, is you write your draft. You may do some proofreading, over a cup of coffee or whatever, but pretty much you leave that draft intact. 6 months later, you go back and revisit it. In the meantime, you could be writing another book. You go back and now you decide you can see so many other things. You can see some things you would have changed. Why did I write this? Why did I write that? So I understand the reasoning behind his logic. Then there's the Dean Koontz camp, who I read an interview with Dean where he expressed what the way he does things is he will write in the morning, he'll get all his words out, and then throughout the day, he'll just go back through that last completed chapter, and he'll find typos, fix them, clean up the wording, make the prose more eloquent, maybe add some more description, whatever needs to be done to make that chapter the way he envisions, his work should be. When he finishes that night, that chapter is done. It is in its final form. So it isn't so much like there is a revision, it's more like multiple revisions throughout the day. He's kind of looking things over. And that's the way I like to do things, not because I'm just because I'm a huge fan of Dean Koontz, but also because psychologically, I like to reach the end of the day and know that that chapter is done. If I'm 30,000 words into an 80,000 word book, I know that I really am about 35 to 40% done. And when I don't actually type the end at the end of my books, but when I do hit the end of the book, I can just turn it over to my editor at that point. I'm free and clear of this book, and I can move on to something else. I used to do those long edits afterwards, and boy, are they a drag. And it just felt like a death march to me. It would take a couple weeks, and I would just be grinding and grinding and grinding and finding this and finding that. I find that just taking care of a chapter a day and moving on is something that it's in perfect form now, minus the editor's edits. And then it goes to a proofreader after that, and I'm done. I'm done completely with that book.
Yeah, and you mentioned editing. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're self-published author, correct?
That's right.
So, and you understand the value of a good editor. I think one of the problems that when people think of self-published books is that certain people kind of don't invest in a good editor, and it might give others a bad rap where it's like, oh, self-published, so there's going to be all sorts of problems with this book. It's not going to be as polished as something from Random House, which I have to tell you, I've read many books from traditional publishers where I've noticed typos, so that's nonsense.
Oh
But
yeah.
how did you find a good editor? And did you find an editor that focused on mysteries and thrillers? Is this a copy editor, a structure editor? Do they do both? Kind of what's that process of working through the editor? And do you work with them on all your books to the point where they're like, okay, I know what he's looking for, and we kind of have this kind of chemistry, almost like songwriters, where you're working together to make that song better?
Yeah, I found my first editor through Reedsy, and I targeted somebody who had a thriller and mystery background as an editor, and she edited quite a few of my books. I eventually switched to a different editor who I found through a writing forum, and she's worked with many writers I know, and she also she targets thriller and mysteries and some other genres too, but she understands the genre, which is important for me. I didn't want just a jack of all trades editor. I wanted somebody who loves that genre and understands the nuances. So that's where I began, and I never approached the situation as find the most affordable editor available and just have them go for it. Now, when I began, I did do some structure editing to ensure that I was growing as a writer. It solved some bad habits. It helped my initial stories. I found that I'm to the point now where structure editor isn't that important to me. It's more about line editing, copy editing, um, maybe saying things in a little bit more eloquent way every now and then, finding those typos, that type of thing. And occasionally there will be a plot hole too, which they'll help with. But yeah, I certainly went in with the full intention of having an editor from the beginning, because I have seen some self-edited, self-published books which did not have editors, and they can be real disasters. It does give the entire industry a bad name, but I can assure you that the people who are selling books month after month as self-published authors have invested in not only the best editors but the best cover designers. The same people you would work with if, yes, you were published through Random House. You're working with these people on your own. You're just doing the legwork on your own. And the obvious advantage is, instead of like giving the vast majority of your profits to a publishing company, you're keeping 70% and Amazon or whomever is taking 30% and the rest is yours. So that's the big advantage, but you really do have to do all those other things. Otherwise, you are not creating a professional product and you won't last very long as a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many books have you written in total so far? And you said you started, was it 2019?
I actually started in 2014 as a horror writer, but it
Okay.
was in I think late 2018 or early 2019, I made the switch to thrillers and mysteries. And that's where really things took off. I don't even look at my backlist anymore as like anything more than it was a learning experience. It taught me how to write and become a better storyteller. Um, I now look at the number of books I've published as whatever I have out in the thriller mystery category, which offhand I would say 2, 8, 19 books, 19 novels now. Those are the books which I count as being the ones which really matter to me. The other books, they may sell enough per day to get me a cup of coffee. But it's the thriller mysteries though that pay the bills and give me a very comfortable living, and I feel very blessed to have happened upon that career change.
So how does one, like how many books is that a year that you're publishing, and how are you keeping up at that pace? I mean, like where did you start out with when it came to your pace? And then how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I've always been, since I became an adult, I've always been very big on goal setting. And goal setting to me, I grew up with a lot of uh, low confidence, lack of confidence, and goal setting to me, I needed proof. I needed proof that I could pull something off ahead of time. So to me, it was one of the first things I did, which seems silly to people from the outside, was I tried to determine how many words are in an actual book. And I had to look at a lot of websites to kind of figure it out. And I was like, okay, so what is the formula per page, words per page? And once I got that down, I realized that the pulpy type mystery thrillers, which I wanted to write, should probably fall somewhere in the 270 to 300 page category at minimum. And some would be longer, some might come in a tad shorter, but that was pretty much the target. That's the bite-sized chunk which readers in that genre tend to lap up most voraciously. And I equated that eventually to a formula which said it's about 70,000 words. And that taught me that if I wrote about, 1,000 words a day, I could finish this manuscript in 70 days. And then eventually I worked up to a little bit more words per day, and I was able to get it down to say 60 to 65 days. Now, what I do is I publish about 4 books per year now, maybe 3 or 4. I've actually pared back a little bit for my horror days. Um, and, and the way I do it is I have to be extremely organized so that I understand ahead of time how long it's going to take me to punch this draft out. I give myself 5, 7 days of wiggle room in there, just knowing that life occasionally happens. There may be a family emergency or something in there. Maybe my computer blows up and it takes me a while to get it replaced. Internet access goes down, whatever. So I bake in 5 to 7 days, which I almost never need to use as wiggle room. Add that together, so now I'm up to 65 to 67 days. My editor usually gets my book done in 1 to 2 weeks, so that adds on another, say, 2 weeks or so to the process. So basically, we're down to about 3 months, and at the same time that I'm putting the book through the editing phase, I'm also ordering the covers and getting those made up as well. And then all that's left is for I have a team of proofreaders who I then send the book to, and they go through it, and we usually catch maybe two or three more things that the editor missed. Usually not much. So the whole process takes about 3 to 3.5 months. And what I have to do in order to keep to my schedule and ensure that my editor has sufficient time with the book and I'm not wasting time in the meantime, as soon as I finish book one, let's say, and hand it over to my editor, I begin the story beat planning phase for book two. And as soon as I'm done with the planning phase, maybe a week later, then I start writing that book. So I'm usually like 5 to 7 chapters into book two by the time that the manuscript comes back from the editor, and then I reformat it, get it ready for publishing, send it off to my beta readers, and they in turn will catch a few more things from me as I continue to write book two. So I have to kind of stagger the releases of how I'm doing my work as the releases go. It does take a lot of organization. I have an app in my phone which tells me everything I need to do on a given day. Like I'll put in my reminder app, send editor my manuscript on the 24th of the month. Maybe a week later, it's get the covers back from my cover designer and make a decision. Those types of things. So everything is laid out ahead of time, and if I didn't do that, I think I'd be a basket case. But because I use an app to remind me, and I've done this now, well, with thrillers and mysteries about 19 times, uh, it's becomes like second nature to me, and it doesn't stress me out at all. In fact, I find that I can punch out those words in about an hour in the morning, do about another hour of editing throughout the day, and then the rest of the day is mine. I can do some advertising work, I can do some promotion work, but for the most part, I can go for bike rides, I can hang out with my wife, can play with the dogs. Pretty much the rest of the day is mine. So it's a very nice existence as long as I stay organized.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I just finished reading Stuart Wood's autobiography. He unfortunately just passed away,
Ooh, yeah.
and he got to the point where he would do, I think, 3 books a year, and he worked an hour a day. And that was just because he got his rhythm down. And he's best known for his Stone Barrington novels, which I love. I think they're just nice and breezy, and the characters are ridiculous and have wonderful names. And it's like a James Bond movie. Like, it's kind of over the top and unrealistic, but you enjoy it for all of its silliness. And um, yeah, it's comfort food, I guess you could say. And so now you're also well, Lisa Scottolini, who I adore, has said that writer's block just isn't a thing. You just sit down and you write. If you think that you need to be inspired every time you have to write, well, then you're just really procrastinating. I mean, do you ever have writer's block, or are you just like, hey, I'm just going to start throwing ideas on a page, and when you're doing your story beats, and if something doesn't make sense, let's swap it out with that. Like, I mean, do you ever run into issues, or are you always, it's always something to work with?
I mean, there's always some type of issue. You're constantly like altering the story as you go along and those types of things. But I've not had writer's block or anything. I agree with him. I don't think the writer's block actually exists. I think it's fear. I think fear is what exists. And when you're staring at a blank page and you have no idea what to write next, that's pretty intimidating, honestly. Yeah, I kind of roll my eyes at all the people who describe themselves as aspiring writers, and they spend day after day dragging the MacBook off to Starbucks and spending $7 on the latte or whatever, and then it's just not hitting me today. I'm just not feeling the inspiration, and maybe tomorrow, and they go back, and this just goes on day after day, and a year later, gee, they haven't written a book. you know um, Writers write, writers write, and writers read. And if you're not doing both of those things, then to me, you're not a writer. You are. I'm not even sure what aspiring writer is. I mean, so many people describe themselves as that on social media. I rarely see anybody as a aspiring um, weight trainer or aspiring worker. It's like either you do it or you don't, and you have to have self-discipline. And those first words which you write, if you are the quote unquote aspiring writer, are going to be really bad words. And you'll probably get halfway through this book of yours if you get that far, and I hope you do. And then you realize this stinks. I'm so much better with this last chapter than I was with chapter one. And then you just like tear up the sheets of paper or delete that file, and then you start over on something new. And then you're probably ready to go. That's what happened to me. I don't know anybody who is just great out of the gate. Most people they have those trunk novels, those books which they meant to publish and they realized when they were done really stunk compared to the stuff that they could write then later. So yeah, I don't believe in writer's block, and that is the reason which I love story beats beyond the organizational aspect of thrillers and mysteries. Is that it reduces the fear aspect quite a bit, keeps your confidence high. You know exactly what you're writing that day and on all forthcoming days, and you can just kind of sit down and go for it. And there's no excuses. You just have to sit down and do it.
Yeah. When I interviewed Lee Child, he told me that nothing of value happens before 10 a.m. So in other words, he's not a morning person. Neither am I. Although my cats wake me up, so what are you going to do? And eventually my baby will wake me up early. So whether I like it or not, I have to be up. Are you a morning person? Since you kind of dictate your own schedule, are you kind of, I know you said you're writing in the morning, but what is the morning to you? Are you writing at like 5 a.m.? Are you writing at 10 a.m.? What, kind of take me through that.
I've read a ton of those self-improvement books. People constantly come back to the most people who are successful are very early morning people. And that's not because there's something more divine about waking up early as opposed to sleeping in. It's about the amount of distractions which will face you throughout the day if you don't. I have not trained myself yet to be the 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning person where I just get up, write, even before the dogs are up, even before my wife is up, and I'm done, by the time that, they get up and do their thing. So yeah, there can still be distractions. That's something which I'm considering for the future is changing my schedule. I am more of a morning person now. I used to always be a sleep in guy, but now I like to wake up sometime between like 6:30 and 7:30. Not real early and certainly not late either. I'll take care of the dogs. I'll eat breakfast, be able to talk with my wife for a little bit, and then I'll just sit down and go to work. Usually that's like where I am now. I'm sitting outside. I like to write outside when the weather allows for me to do so, because I love nature. It's inspiring, and also because it gets me away from people. Nobody can distract me now. I'm just writing. Knock on wood, as long as the neighbor doesn't come by with the lawnmower anytime soon. But yeah, that's one trick which I've found. Another option I've considered is possibly remodeling an area of my house and just kind of have this as dad's space. This is where dad goes when he wants to write. And leave me alone. I will be out in an hour. Whatever it is, unless the house is on fire, I don't want to hear about it. So that may be the next project down the line, is to have someplace where I can work during the winter and the cold and rainy months. Um, but yeah, I there's nothing wrong with being a late person, a late morning person. It's just that you need to set up something so that you're not distracted. With you're going to have a baby soon, and That's very distracting. But at least with a baby, the distractions can come in the middle of the night or the middle of the day. So, it probably doesn't matter what your sleep schedule is at that point because you're not going to get that much.
Exactly, right. You find your free time where you can get it.
Yeah.
Um, Very interesting. So, your books, are they all self-published through like Kindle Direct Publishing, or have you tried different avenues? Just tell me about that.
Yeah, they are. For a while, I wanted to go what they call wide, which is instead of being exclusive to Amazon and making 70% on every sale, you would be non-exclusive. You'd make 35% on every sale. You wouldn't be able to sell your books through Kindle Unlimited or allow them to be borrowed, I should say. Um, and then I would send all my books through a service called Smashwords, and those books would go to Google Play and Apple iBooks and Nook and Barnes and Noble, everywhere you can think of. Scripd. I wanted that to work so much because I mean, who wants to put all their eggs in one basket? And who wants to just feed the Amazon monster either, which is running just about everybody out of business these days. So I wanted it to work and it didn't. My sales plummeted so much when I went wide and I didn't have Kindle Unlimited and I didn't have the 70% commission on book sales from Amazon. The other thing which I noticed too is, well, there were so many people who swore by wide and said you have to do it, Dan. At least give it time. They said I had to give it 6 months. Well, I gave it 6 months, and my sales were actually falling, not rising during that time period. Um, it got to the point where I knew I was going to go back to Amazon. It took me about a month to get everything delisted on all those other sites, and when I went back to Amazon, not only was I making more at Amazon than I was at all those other sites combined, I was making more from Kindle Unlimited than I was making from all those other sites combined. In fact, as I like to tell people, Kindle Unlimited is my number one bookseller. Amazon is my second leading bookseller. Most of my books are Kindle Unlimited, and it makes sense. I'm not a household name. People who subscribe to Kindle Unlimited, which I do. I love to discover new authors through Kindle Unlimited. It's a wonderful way to take a chance on somebody without taking a chance, really. You see something that looks intriguing, that might be a great book. I'll check it out. If it turns out that it's garbage, you just return it. You don't have to pay a cent for it. If you love it, you may end up even buying it. I've bought many books on business and things which I can apply to my life, investing books, self-improvement books, which I first borrowed in Kindle Unlimited and loved them so much that I ended up just buying them. I probably wouldn't do that with fiction. I have done it a few times when I really, really love the book. But for the most part, I just borrow through Kindle Unlimited, and it takes the risk away. And I think that's why people, in large part, discover me through Kindle Unlimited. And they many of them do go on to become book buyers of mine as well in the future. But I really think that is huge. If you're trying to go wide and people don't know who you are, I mean, good luck selling a book through Barnes and Noble or Apple or Google or whomever. If people haven't heard of you, why would they take a risk on a 14.99 paperback or a 5.99 ebook or something like that when they can buy something for maybe a buck more from somebody who they already know they love? So I think that may have been one of my biggest problems when I tried to go wide is I wasn't known. And these days I don't have to be known.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So the 70%, so that applies to Kindle book sales. So how does it work with Kindle Unlimited? If someone borrows, what's the percentage? Is it based on not just if they borrow it, but if they read it to completion? Like, how do they, what are the percentages and how do they determine what you're getting?
It's actually fascinating. It's based on the amount of pages read. So, and when you first hear the quote, I think they say something, the rate goes up and down every month. But last I checked, it was something like uh, four tenths or 4.5 tenths of a cent is what you make for every page which is read, which at first seems like, really? I would go to the poorhouse like that. But a book has quite a few pages in it. And for whatever reason, they have this bizarre formula at Amazon. The way they calculate pages for Kindle Unlimited is different from the way that they calculate it for the actual ebook or the print book. It's actually more pages in Kindle Unlimited's eyes. So my 300-page book may actually be 400 pages in their eyes for Kindle Unlimited. And this ends up being, like, to me, it's like the perfect uh, way to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to self-published authors, many of which are in Kindle Unlimited. If you write a book which is just garbage and it's full of typos or it's just a bad story, people are going to give up after about 5 or 10 pages. And that's all you're going to make money off of. Pennies, literally pennies. If they read that whole 400-page book, now you're actually making some real money. It's not quite as much as a book sale would be, but it's pretty close once you do the math. And again, you have to take into account the way that they count pages differently with Kindle Unlimited than they do for anything else. So I end up making about maybe just slightly less through Kindle Unlimited for a full book read than I would if I had just sold that book to somebody. But there are so many more people, though, who are willing to take a chance on Kindle Unlimited that my Kindle Unlimited sales, or revenue, I should say, are about 3 times the revenue which I get from book sales, and maybe like 20 to 30 times the amount I get from paperback sales, which continues just to diminish year after year as people switch over to ebooks. So that has been the business as I've seen it over the last few years, is that Kindle Unlimited continues to grow and grow and grow, and ebooks are becoming a much larger portion of the pie, along with audiobooks.
Yeah, it's interesting. Couple things there. One is I absolutely agree. I love ebooks. I love audiobooks. Yeah, a physical book, sure, depending on who it is. If it's like some like great author who I absolutely love, and or some sort of like coffee table book, yeah, okay, then I'll buy like a hardback if it's autographed, right? But if it's just, hey, I just want to read a good fiction book, it's just from a space perspective, it's just easier to have stuff digitally. Also, I like to say that if you have something digitally, you don't have to worry about spilling a cup of coffee on it or whatever. It's always perfect because
Yeah,
it's digital. You can always retrieve it from the cloud and it will be in the same pristine condition it was in when you first purchased it. So, but I feel like traditional publishers don't like to talk about that too much, and they like to act like, oh, ebooks are a bit of a fad and they're not as popular as they were when the Kindle first came out. But according to you, that's not really the case. I mean, you're seeing that the print demand is actually diminishing, where the ebook and the audiobook demand is increasing. And when it comes to the Kindle Unlimited, I mean, just give us a sense here. What are you making in 12 months, revenue wise, if you were willing to share that? And how much of that would you say is coming from, and how's that pie split up?
yeah. My revenue for a 12-month period is about 480 grand right now. In terms of profit, what I take home after all my book covers, editing costs, advertising, et cetera, is about 350 to 360K. So I would say of that, at least just from the revenue, I would say 5 to 10% of that is paperback sales. Maybe 30% is coming from, or 30 to 40% from ebooks, and then the vast majority of that comes from Kindle Unlimited. In fact, now that I think about it, I think it may actually be more than that. The Kindle Unlimited Kindle sales split. I would have to lower the paperbacks by a few percentage points. So yeah, it's almost all coming from Kindle Unlimited and Kindle sales.
Incredible. And so, how long did it take you to become profitable? Did it take, because I know some authors it takes like 7 books or more. I mean, when were you like, hey, I could do this full time?
Yeah, to when I first published a book back in 2014, and again, those were horror novels. I always had this idea that, boy, if I could just make like $100 a month from book sales, think of how much that would free up our budget, and it could pay for this, it could pay for that. Just saving up for a vacation just seemed like a pipe dream back then. And all the way through late 2018, it just was a pipe dream. I wasn't growing my revenue by very much. My horror novels weren't selling. I was doing book signings, and I would have a nice little day there, but it didn't seem to translate to book sales online after that, and it just wasn't working for me. And I remember that I had written a book called Severity, which I intended to be a horror novel. It ended up being more of a combination of like Silence of the Lambs and if you remember the old movie from the 80s, Sleeping with the Enemy. Um, it was very much about like a stalking husband, or I think in the movie's case it was a stalking boyfriend. I can't remember. Um, and after I finished writing it and had the cover made for it and all that, and published it, I realized that I hadn't even written a horror novel. I had clearly written a psychological thriller. And Severity was a really bad name for a psychological thriller. And the cover, which was a fine cover as a horror novel, was a terrible cover for a psychological thriller. And hence that book like tanked so badly. I just couldn't sell it to save my life. And it hurt me because at that point it was my best writing. And I really thought it was a great story, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, just to make a long story short, I eventually changed the name of the book to Her Shallow Grave, which is very much a psychological thriller title, and I got a new cover for it as well. I'm actually considering getting yet another cover for it, which is from my new cover designer, who's just great. And once I did that, sales picked up because people realized what it was when they saw it, and at least it was a recognizable entity when it was sitting in the Kindle bookstore. Um, but that gave me the idea, this was really fun, and it felt like I was more in my element when I was not only writing tense horror type scenes, but I was also dealing with relationships and the way people deal with each other and storytelling. And I realized, I should really consider writing more books like this. And once I started to investigate the genre, I found that psychological thrillers, thrillers in general, mysteries were selling maybe 30 to 40 fold what horror books were online. The market was just so much larger. It also meant there was a lot more competition too. I mean, there's a ton of people who understand there's money in this industry, and they want to write too in that genre. So I knew I'd be up against a lot of heavy hitters if I decided to do this. Uh, I was going out for uh, my 50th birthday party in 2018. My wife and I went to one of the Finger Lakes and got in a bed and breakfast for the weekend. And I said, you know what? I'm going to read one of these supposed, gripping thriller type books that I always see, near the top of the rankings, and just see if is this really for me? Can I do this? So I went with a self-published author. I went with a book called Dead End Girl, which is the first book in the Violet Darger series by Tim McBain and L.T. Vargas, who since then have become great friends of mine. Uh, as soon as I got a few chapters into the book, I was just in love. It was like somebody had taken the old Hannibal Lecter novels, merged them with Criminal Minds, and merged them with like this tongue-in-cheek humor, and it was just so much fun to read. And I instantly knew that this was not beyond me. I can definitely write this, but not only could I write this, but I would love to write this. I would just like approach every writing day with so much more intensity and so much more positivity. And so that became the Scarlet Bell series for me. That was very much a tribute to LT and Tim in the way that they tell stories. And that led to me writing Darkwater Cove, which was kind of a return to my horror roots, but still staying with psychological thriller and mystery. And then when I decided to write something a little bit less dark than Darkwater Cove, and I wrote the Wolf Lake series, it was just kind of like a shot in the dark as to whether people would even like what I was going to write, because I wanted to tell stories about people at that point, not just mysteries and thrillers. So I set out to create something completely new, and I envisioned this small town sheriff who had Asperger's syndrome, and he had kind of overcome this throughout his entire life, and he'd moved up through the LAPD as a detective, and eventually he was shot and he returned home, and he became a deputy in his own hometown and eventually sheriff. Um, and he's going through all these emotional problems from the shooting, as well as he has Asperger's and how he deals with people, and that really opened the door to something which I didn't expect. As I started to write the characters, I found that the characters needed to care about Thomas, the sheriff, and Thomas needed to care about them, and it became this completely different monster than I envisioned. Yes, it was still a very dark story. It still had a very Hannibal Lecter type flair to it, but it was about people. That was the story at the surface. Deep down, the story was about overcoming adversity, helping each other, and the power of love and friendship. And I found that people, my readers, just grew, you know, by the gazillion fold once I wrote that story. It's like people, it just resonated with so many people, that thriller and mysteries could go in this totally different direction all of a sudden, and you could have your cake and eat it too. And that's where things really got very popular for me. But it took a while. Like I said, I switched genres at the end of 2018. I think all the Scarlet Bell books were out by maybe early 2019 or late 2019. Um, at that point, I was starting to make some real money, but it was like maybe I was selling several $100s of books per month and keeping about 300 of that in after all my costs. But I knew I was building towards something. I was increasing my mailing list. I was starting to build a following for these types of books. Darkwater Cove really took things to a whole different level. And my book sales went up into four figures, not that far into four figures per month, but it was into four figures per month. Um, and I was starting to see like close to $1,000 in profit every month. And that was growing as each book in Darkwater Cove came out. So at that point, I knew that I was really onto something. I was working as a meteorologist at the time. I was a lead forecaster with the National Weather Service under NOAA. And I loved my job. My job fascinated me, and I loved the people that I worked with. But the shift work was absolutely killing me. I'd been in the job for over 25 years. Um, I, I, I was to the point where I couldn't stomach midnight shifts anymore. And they came up every 19. Always miss birthdays, always miss holidays, not be there for important events in my children's lives. And I knew I wanted something more. And boy, wouldn't it be something if I could replace my income just from writing. But I used to talk with my wife about that, and it would always kind of be like, yeah, haha, if that day ever came, right? Um, and it actually did come. Shortly after the Wolf Lake series came out and Darkwater Cove was completely finished, I started to make as much money from my writing, profit, not just sales, but profit, as I was taking home per month from my real job. And when I got to that point, I kind of backtracked and I was like, well, it's been a great ride. I think we're like early 2021 now. So it's been a great ride, but this could all blow up tomorrow. My sales could go way down. They could be cut in half. I just don't feel comfortable. So I made the decision that if I ever hit twice my income in book revenue or in book profit, then I would retire. Well, it got to be about May of 2021, and we were over a year into COVID at that point, and work really stunk because we were all masked up and avoiding people and things like that. And I said at that point, I'm done. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna give word to my boss that I'm leaving at the end of the summer after everybody gets their vacation time in. And so last year we went on vacation. We went down to Vero Beach to stay at one of Disney's resorts, and it was just every day we're just jumping in pool and avoiding people because of COVID, and just enjoying the sun. And I remember thinking at the time, God, I've got to go back to work for another 2 months still. I'm not retiring until September. This really stinks, and it just seemed like a slog, that could I make it through the next 2 months? And at the same time, my book sales were continuing to grow as more and more people like were flocking to this Wolf Lake series and discovering Darkwater Cove and the Scarlet Bell books. And now I was making 3 times my income. And by the time I walked away for good on September 11th, September 12th, 2021 was my first day of quote unquote freedom. At that point, I was making so much money that um, I knew that even if my money went down by 2/3, I would still be making as much as I had been working full time, putting in 9-hour days, commuting through the snow in the winter, and putting my life at risk, and staying up all night and missing holidays, and there was just no comparison. So, in comparison, now I'm living a dream. It's wonderful, and I won't allow myself to complain about, I got to write today. I've got to work on more advertisements. I don't feel like that at all. I just feel like, isn't it wonderful that we've been blessed that I can put in these 2-hour days, and I can work from anywhere. I can work on vacation. I can work from, a, a bench in a park if I want to. As long as I have internet access, I can write. So it's just a whole new world for me, and I'm just so thankful for all these readers who support me so much, and love these Wolf Lake books, and love Darkwater Cove as well.
That's wonderful to hear. Yeah, I was saying to someone the other day that if the older you get, the whole reason why we work is for financial independence. The whole reason why we want financial independence, so we have more free time.
Yeah,
So if the older you get, the more you're working and the less free time you have, well, you're doing something wrong, right? And you kind of figure that out. Uh, and this, and it was almost like a silver lining of COVID in a way, because of the situation, how everything played out.
hmm
You said, you know what, I'm going to go for it, and I'm sure that was a really liberating feeling. Congratulations. I mean, that's just
thank you.
fantastic. Uh, and so when it comes to, for those who've never done it before, when it comes to actually publishing with the Kindle Direct publishing, are you doing it yourself? I know there are companies that will do it for you, where you just give them the manuscript and they're like, okay, we'll just put it on the up on the store and all that. Or are you actually going through and doing all that yourself?
Doing it all myself. The key is that I used to write in this. I still write in a program called Scrivener, and I would use Scrivener to format my books. And they weren't very good formats, unfortunately. Um, they're pretty weak, actually, and they required a lot of work, especially to get the paperbacks right. And there were so many frustrations and curse words, when I was trying to get the paperback written. And I kept hearing from people, use Scrivener, or no, don't use Scrivener to write, use Vellum to format your book. Vellum, however, was only on Mac, and I've always been a PC user. Well, last year I finally threw up my hands, when we were on vacation, actually, 2 months before I was going to retire, and I said it's time that I invest in a Mac and this Vellum program and see if it's all as cracked up to be. I installed that program in about a minute, and within 2 minutes, I had loaded my manuscript in, formatted it, and had a beautiful ebook and a beautiful paperback, which was completely ready for Amazon, both of which were ready for Amazon, uh, better than anything I've ever had in my life. And it had taken maybe a tenth of the time to do so. So I love Vellum. I'll never go back for formatting as long as they keep making it better and better. And I use it for all my books now, and it's so easy. And people ask me, "You really spent a grand plus on a Mac, and another couple $100 on this program just so you can format your books?" I said, "Yes." I said, "If you know the amount of hours which I put into formatting before every book which I released, and how much it stunk, and how much better the product looks now, this it's nothing. I mean, the $1,500 in total which I spent, it's nothing. It's more than paid for itself, in my opinion, just the hours it saved me. So yeah, I'll never go back. So yeah, that's if you're going to be self-published, there are certain things which you just have to do, which the publishing company would have done for you had you found a good deal. And as we already mentioned, editing. You have to have an editor. You have to design your own. Well, you don't have to design your own book cover, but you need to find somebody who's really good to design your book cover, and don't go cheap on that. The better book cover designer you get, the more your book's going to sell. Um, also, all the formatting, you have to do that, and you have to learn how to do it. With Vellum, there really isn't much to learn at all. As long as you can convert your book into a docx format, that's all that Vellum needs. So it's so easy. So if you have a Microsoft Word, you're set to go. Um, and then there's advertising, which I will say is 90% of my success is advertising and learning about advertising, because again, we all start out from square one. Nobody knows our names, and I'm as much as I sell books every day, I'm no household name. If you know we were talking before we came on that I just spent some time in Ocean City. If you walk down the boardwalk and ask people, "You ever read a book by Dan Padavana?" They would have been, "Who?" You know, nobody who's going to know my name. If I'm lucky, I might find one person on the boardwalk all day who's actually heard of my books. So of course that means I still have a large market out there too. Uh, but yeah, I'm not a household name. I'm not Dean Koontz. I'm not Stephen King. I'm not even L.T. Vargas and Tim McBain. I'm just building myself up from a small base, and making a really nice living at doing that. But I went in with no ego. I went at the beginning saying, people don't know who I am, and if I don't expose people to my books by force, then they're never going to read me. They're never going to hear about me, and I'm never going to build my following. So when I first began advertising, I accepted that I was going to have losing months. In fact, I was probably going to have several losing months, because it wasn't so much about trying to turn a profit at that point. It was about getting my name out there, getting people on my mailing list, getting people to you know uh, finding that audience, that initial audience, which would love my style so much that they would go out and tell some friends, and then those friends would tell a few more friends. So it took time, but even to this day, I still advertise. I probably spend about $400 to $500 per day just on advertising through Amazon and Facebook, and whatever. Those are the two big ones for me. But whatever else is working at that time, I'll use it. Um, and then I love going on, like a podcast like today, or anytime anybody wants to interview me, then I always make the time, because again, I have no ego in this. I realize that most people have never heard of me, no matter how much I'm pulling in, and I can always grow my audience. So that's part of advertising as well. So yeah, that's the biggest thing though, is being willing to advertise, and to learn about effective advertising, because you can lose a ton of money on advertising if you just kind of go in blindly and start, targeting authors you've never heard of, or making ads in Facebook that aren't very well designed and aren't catchy. So, I learned about copywriting. I learned about effective imagery, which you can use in ads. All these things which a publisher would have done for me. Um, that's part of self-publishing. Is you have to do these things. And I think if more people realized anyway, how much self-published authors, successful self-published authors do to get their name out and to put out quality products, there would be a lot more uh, um, respect for those writers, and a lot less hesitation, a lot less resistance. I think that we're working a lot harder than published authors because they're pretty much turning it over to the company, and the company's doing it for them. We're razor focused. Those of us who are successful, we know exactly who our target authors are. We know that you know people who like Melinda Lee or people who like John Sandford will like my books, and those are the people that we go after. Um, you know, if somebody's doing that for you, I kind of wonder what's going to happen to you if you ever lose that publishing deal. Then what do you do? Are you going to be able to advertise your book successfully? Do you know who your target audience really is? So that's always been really important to me, and it doesn't require that much time. I mean, it's an extra 5 to 15 minutes per day, and I can get on with my life after that. It's just something which I had to work on for months to get good at, and now it's just kind of evergreen. It's constantly feeding new readers into my system.
And you mentioned that you learned how to do copywriting and things like that. So is someone creating the obviously a great graphic design person for the covers? Are you basically taking those assets and saying, hey, give me some in these different, like for banner ads or this or that I can use for advertising? Is that kind of part of the deal that you're thinking ahead when it comes to creating the ads?
My cover designer has been at it for a long time, so she really has like a sixth sense for all this stuff anyway. So yeah, she constantly will, when she's done with my cover, and I've okayed it and said, yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for. She will then create my paperback version based on the description which I give her. She puts the description right on the back cover for me, and then she'll also will create banner graphics for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Um, I think that's it, and uh, she will very successfully just take my description that I've given her and like pull out like a couple key phrases out of that, and she's just great at pulling like the catchy phrase which I could use like in a banner ad out of that. And yeah, so I don't even have to like lead her by the hand in that at all. I mean, I certainly could. But I know that there probably will come a time where I'll say, why don't you say this instead? But I haven't needed to yet. She's really good at that. And it almost makes me think that she's done advertising as well. And a lot of those little snippets I like to contain in my own copywriting for ads, or at least those will be my inspirations for what I'm going to write. Because people like catchy headlines. You've got to catch somebody's attention. Somebody's just kind of cruising through Facebook, looking at books on Amazon, and who do they know? Who do they know you from? So your book cover has to be out there and it has to catch their eyes. It's got to be a really good cover. It has to be instantly recognizable as a book from that genre which you're writing in. Your title has to fit in with other titles. It can be as creative as you want it, but it has to make sense for the genre. If you get too cute and too creative with the title, people aren't going to know that it's even part of that genre. I can't get away with calling a horror novel The Shining. Everybody already knew who Stephen King was when he was writing The Shining, so he could get away with it. Not that I would ever call a book Scary Ghost House or Scary Ghost Hotel, but you do have to meet genre expectations, and all of that also informs the advertisement. The advertisement will speak to the way I would like to be speaking to as a reader of thrillers and mysteries. and dark psychological thrillers. So I think about what would catch my attention, and that's what informs the ads. And I constantly tweak until I get them right, and I see that they're at their most effective.
Absolutely, very interesting. And yeah, the for example, I'm looking at the cover of Dark Water Cove right now, and it's gorgeous. Um,
Thank you.
and the thing that's really fascinating about covers is a lot of people thought, oh, with the rise of e-readers and audiobooks and all that, covers don't matter like they used to. They do, because if you're looking at a bunch of covers on Kindle Unlimited and you know that you're not paying for each book, but you're borrowing, then the cover is probably more important than anything. That, the description, the reviews, all of those things, because that's what you're basing it off of. Like, if the cover has to grab your attention in a way where you're like, that looks sleek and professional,
Mhm.
and if it doesn't look like you just threw it together in some program yourself, and that's almost like, I'd say, the first test that it needs to pass to even get someone to click.
Oh yeah,
Even if it's just a little square, if it's like Dark Water Cove, there's like beautiful, coloring and big lettering, and just um, where someone's like, "Ooh, I'd like to be there, like that person in that photo." Then they're gonna click it and want to learn more. I just think that sometimes people um, just don't realize just how it might even be more important now than it's ever been, because there's so much competition.
it is more important. There's no question that it's more important. In the comparison in which I'll use is usually when you walk into a bookstore, you already know what you're going to get. You've taken your wallet to Barnes and Noble because there's a certain book you're looking for, and you're just going to go there and you're going to grab it. No, occasionally you do browse. You do go there and you start looking through the shelves. I'm a big fantasy reader as well as a thriller mystery reader. So sometimes, maybe I just walk through the sections, hey, what's new, But what I'm really looking at is I'm just kind of looking at you're looking at, the side of the jacket, and then you'll pull it out, and then maybe you'll check a couple books which are nearby and see what kind of catches your eye best on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble or wherever you're buying your books online. You're presented with this cover, and next to it are dozens of other covers. Yours has to stick out from the others, or at least has to compete with the others successfully. So I think that there's actually more distraction to your eye now than there was before. So if you like, you know, half-ass it with your cover, you stand no chance to sell that book now. You really do have to pay up for a good designer and take time with that designer to create the vision which you are looking for, and make sure that again it hits genre tropes and it's instantly recognizable as what it is at its core.
Yeah. Just to kind of one of the last topics that I talk about are audiobooks. I know we've kind of touched on them a little bit, but audiobooks have become incredibly popular, with Audible, Scribd, Libby, people just borrowing them from the library too. And I mean, obviously books and tape have been around for years, but I think with the rise in podcasts, um, audiobooks have kind of ridden that wave. I like to say I was into audiobooks before they just got red hot. Um, but they're really hot. And now Audible has Audible Plus, which is essentially like their Kindle Unlimited, if you will, on the Audible side of things. So, what's it look like for you on the audiobook side of things? Are you self-publishing those audiobooks? How does it work with getting a narrator? Um, you know, its availability. It looks like you're not currently part of Audible Plus. Will you be? Just kind of take me through that for anyone who's trying to get into the audiobook business, if you will.
Yeah, I'm personally a subscriber to Audible Plus, and I really like it. My Wolf Lake series is what they call wide, like I mentioned earlier. It goes to all audio retailers, um, and I just did that with the audiobooks, and I really regret it because Audible sells by far more audiobooks for me than anybody else does, and I can't go back. Audible, once you make a book non-exclusive, will not allow you to make it exclusive with them in the future. Not sure what the reasoning is, but that is the reasoning. So all 10 books in the Wolf Lake series, all audiobooks are available pretty much from everywhere. all my other audiobooks are exclusive to Amazon, and they are available through everything. They're through, Audible Plus or whatever. So that allows me to get it to more people. And I found that audiobooks, I haven't seen where they're exploding, the where I've heard some people in the industry say, but they're definitely growing. They're getting to be a bigger and bigger piece of the pie. Um, I think it's at this point they've just overtaken paperbacks for me, but they're not competitive yet with ebooks and with Kindle Unlimited, but they're growing. So I assume that probably in the next 5 years they're going to be pretty close to competitive with ebooks. I don't know that I'll ever see them overtake ebooks because books are just so convenient, especially ebooks are so convenient to take with you. But I always partake in audiobooks. If I'm in the car, I'm on a long trip, it's just perfect. I could listen to a story, or I can put on a self-improvement book or a business book, and get some new ideas for what I want to do with my business. Um, so I definitely see the benefits. I bought earbuds just so I could listen to audiobooks when I'm riding on my bike, you know, because I'm on it so often. Uh, and now I can take stories with me and take improvement with me as well. So I think that they're going to be getting bigger and bigger. But at least from my standpoint, I've not seen where they're competitive yet with ebooks. Oh
And
yeah,
so,
and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention too. Yeah, how do you do it as a
right, yep,
self-published author? Yeah,
exactly.
so ACX is the company which Amazon oversees, and you go to ACX, and you can either, like, if you already have a narrator producer who's made your files for you, you can just upload them at that point, and you link them to your ebook. You link your audiobook to your ebook, and then boom, you're done. It's out there as soon as they do a quality test on it. Um, but if you don't have a narrator, you can search for a narrator through ACX, and you can put in all things like, I want somebody with this type of accent, or somebody who can do this type of impression. I want male, I want female, I want English speaking, I want some other country speaking, other language speaking. Um, you can you can even get down to like vocal type, husky, dark, eerie, things like that. And you can really narrow down, the type of narrator which you're looking for. I've found that there are a lot of narrators who will do a book cheaply. They'll just they'll share the profit with you and even do it for free. Um, but I've found that in large part those narrators are not very good. Um, it's better to spend about $200 or more per production hour. And most of my books, that's usually about eight hours, so about $1,600 I'll spend to get an audiobook created, and that's everything. Everything is made for me. Um, and what you can do is you can put based on your criteria, you can open up your script for auditions, and then you can just go through the auditions and decide, yeah, this is good, that's terrible, this is good, this is terrible. And what I'll do is I'll just go through and I'll favorite the ones which I like, and I'll just ignore all the others. And once I find a narrator who I really like, then I'll have them do my book, and then if that meets all my expectations, I don't even have to audition in the future. As long as they want to keep working with me, I can just like send them an email and say, hey, let's do another book together, and they'll give me their production schedule, and we'll work something out together. Right now, I'm working with somebody, Connie Shabshab, who's just such a tremendous narrator, and she's done all my Scarlet Bell books, and she's doing a spin-off of the Scarlet Bell books for me right now, and I have a new series which I'm starting. As I mentioned earlier, the new Thomas Shepard mystery books, which I'm going to have her do those as well, as long as she's interested in those books. So, yeah, it's once you find somebody great, work with that person as much as you can. but it takes a while to find people because there's a lot of people out there who just aren't very good at it. So you'll have to separate the wheat from the chaff, as I like to say again. You'll have to do some work and go through some cringeworthy auditions before you find the one who's that diamond in the rough who you really like.
Absolutely. And so how long is I know if it's through a traditional publisher, the audiobook, they might have the rights for X number of years, and then you'll see like a new production of it, right, with the new narrator and stuff. When you're going through ACX, is it up there like permanently, or is it up there for like how many years? Like, and can you just keep using the same, like if people love the recording that you have of it, can you just renew it? I mean, what's that process like?
It is considered published forever, just like an ebook, as long as you want it on Audible. And I'm sure the other sites are just like that as well. Um, the catch is though, if you have a deal with a production with a producer narrator where they're sharing the profits with you in lieu of an upfront cost to them, or maybe no cost to them, for them, then they have certain rights too, which are protected by Audible and ACX, where you can't just like say, "Oh, this is terrible. I'm taking it down," like 2 or 3 months later. I think that I'm don't quote me on this, but I believe the deal is 7 months or 7 years, something like that anyway, where you can hit that point and just say, "All right, I want somebody else to narrate this book for me," and then you can go out and create another deal. If you pay for everything up front, it's all up to you. So for whatever reason, somebody I'm paying for my audiobook and I love ends up just doing a terrible job with one of my books, I could turn around the next day, unpublish it, because they've already been paid. They don't have any more reason to hold me to anything. I could just turn around and get another producer. I'll have to pay all over again, but I can go through the process, start to finish again. So that's how ACX works. I assume that's the way the other companies work as well. I will mention, I kind of said that, I wish I had kept everything in Audible, especially the Wolf Lake books. Uh, there is some hope for the future, for the very near future, that being wide in audio will actually be very profitable. And that is Findaway Voices, who distributes a lot of books for audiobooks to other retailers like Google and Apple and Scribd and all these other sites. They were purchased by Spotify, and it's been long rumored for many years now that Spotify wanted to get into the audiobook business, um, and it looks like that was their reason for purchasing Findaway Voices. I can't imagine why they would have otherwise. So I'm very hopeful that there's going to be this new platform through Spotify for audiobooks, and that will allow them to become competitive with Audible. Because again, if you don't have to, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But for me, it makes a lot more sense with Kindle Unlimited and ebooks. I don't want that to be the case with audiobooks, but so far it is.
Mm. And so what's the percentage split for Audible? I know you were saying it's like 70% for Kindle uh, that you keep. How does it work with Audible?
It's a lot lower than that. They're all pretty low, honestly. Um, there is there are a few articles which attempt to they're like exposés where they attempt to figure out what percentage uh, we're actually taking after Audible sells their book and keeps their commission. And I think it was like below 20% or very close to 20%. It was kind of embarrassing. So yeah, there's to some people it's kind of a scandal, the way Audible treats their producers and their booksellers, audiobook sellers. Um, I don't think anything is going to change unless Spotify or somebody like that comes into the industry and really shakes things up and makes it very profitable for audiobook authors to make the switch. I'm hopeful that once Spotify gets into the game, or at least somebody will get into the game that will be a relevant competitor to Audible, and that the percentage which they give to people like me will be a lot higher and make it more worthwhile to not go exclusive with Audible. So again, having seen the way Spotify treats its musicians, I'm not crossing my fingers on that being the case, but I'm at least hopeful at this point that there will be um, a sizable shift in the industry, especially because Spotify just can't come in and say, I'm just going to pay everybody pennies. They already have this giant in the industry, Audible, which they have to compete with. And they have to give a reason for many of us to go over to that platform. So I hope that they do, and I hope that shakes things up, and I hope that that allows those of us who are with Audible to make more money from them.
Two more questions related to that. So one is, if you're exclusive with Audible, if you say, I'm going through ACX, this book will be exclusive to Audible, what happens if you change your mind down the line? Are you shit out of luck, or does that contract last indefinitely? I'm just curious, like, are you signing over that book forever? I mean, how's that work?
The way the exclusivity works, and I find this bizarre, and I'm not sure what the reasoning is, but ACX will allow you to shift a book from exclusive to non-exclusive as long as you ask them to do so.
Hmm.
The catch is once you go to non-exclusive, or if you begin as non-exclusive, you can never go back to exclusive. I don't know why that is. And to me, it would seem counterintuitive. It would seem to me like they would want people taking books out of Barnes and Noble, taking books out of Google Play, and bringing them just to Audible, making them, this is the one-stop shop. But they won't do that. So I'm sure that they have a good reason for it. I don't know what that reason is, but you need to make a decision. If you decide to go non-exclusive from the beginning, or you want to shift out of exclusivity, you need to be really sure because there's no turning back, at least at this point in time.
Yeah. And the other thing is, so I think it was past year or two, Audible launched Audible Plus, which for those that don't know is essentially like their version of Scribd, or the Netflix of books, audiobooks, meaning that they have kind of a rotating catalog of books that you can borrow like Kindle Unlimited. They also have a bunch of original content they produce, especially lately with celebrities narrating things, or stuff by James Patterson that's exclusive for Audible, etc.
Mhm.
So this can be a way for listeners like myself and those watching this interview to check out a new author who they haven't experienced before. So as I'm looking at it now, while your books are published to ACX, I don't see any in the Plus catalog currently. Is that something that you're looking into doing, saying, hey, can I add my books to that? And do you kind of know the financial structure of doing that? Because if you're only getting 20% for audiobook sales through Audible, I kind of shudder to think, what would it be if it could be borrowed through the
Yeah,
Plus catalog? Would it be less?
I find ACX's their website to be absolutely demystifying, or mystifying. I ended up choosing what I thought was correct and making it exclusive, but somehow they didn't get into Audible Plus. So that's I want them there, and that's one of those things on my to-do list is to get them on the horn and discuss, why aren't they on there and what setting am I missing that I need to get them on there with. Because, yeah, I assume that they will be very similar to Kindle Unlimited, and that many of my Audible income, much of my Audible income will come from Audible Plus rather than flat out sales. Because again, people are taking chances with Audible Plus. I've done that with a couple audiobooks just in the last month where I downloaded it just on a whim from Audible Plus, and in two cases they were great, and I stuck with them and listened all the way through. And in one, it was terrible, so I immediately returned it, and I wasn't out any money. So yeah, I love that idea. I love the Kindle Unlimited for the same reason. So yeah, I want to be part of that. And again, for non-household names, which are 99.9% of us, I think it's really important that you have a risk-free um, way for people to discover you, whether that be on audiobooks or ebooks.
Excellent. So it's really been a wonderful discussion. I guess just to kind of wrap up, what do you have that you're working on right now, or any new releases that are coming or just released that people should be looking out for? And then where can people find you?
Well, the third book in the Logan and Scarlet thriller series will come out at the end of August, and that's probably going to be the most intense one in the series so far. And I've already kind of formed in my mind what I want to do with book four in that series, but I don't anticipate that will be coming for at least another few months, if not several months. Then there's Grave Girl, which will be the first book in the Thomas Shepard mysteries, which is nothing more than a continuation of the Wolf Lake series, and that's going to come out a few days after Christmas. So I'm really excited about that one. That's actually the book which I'm writing at the moment, and I'm having a great time with it. Just as great a time as I had writing the Wolf Lake series, and I think that everybody who loved Wolf Lake is definitely going to love that book as well. As far as where to find me, I would suggest everybody go to danpadavona.com. That's Padavona, and check out my books there. I have links directly from there if you want to buy something from Amazon, or I also offer a free book too if you're interested in just finding out about my writings and taking a risk-free plunge. Join my thriller mailing list and download that book. And if you love it, you can continue on as it's actually a prequel to the Darkwater Cove series. And if you like that book, you'll definitely like Darkwater Cove.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Dan. Really appreciate all the insights, and both for readers and as we were talking about, aspiring writers, where you can take it from being aspiring to writing by just writing, regardless of what it is you're writing, and reading. And hopefully, those who are watching will, like you said, take that risk-free chance, borrow your books, love them, and hey, if they want to buy them as well, even better.
That's right,
So,
Michael. Yeah, it's again, I know that you're gonna knock out that book too, and it's everything's gonna go well for you. It's just it's a matter of mind over matter, and you just have to work on it every day, and as long as you do that, then it'll get written, and you'll fulfill that dream.
excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate your time and the insights, and it's been a wonderful discussion.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it.
All right. You take care.